Welcome, everybody. It's time once again to grab your board and catch a wave as we ride the sales pipeline with the master of the sales pipeline universe, Matt Hines.
How are you doing, Paul?
Okay. How do you like that one? Is that a good one?
It's I've kind of become numb to all the various titles and superlatives you continue to throw out here. It's fun. It's always exciting to see what you're going to come up with. But, I am not worthy, my friend. But thank you very much for the intro. I appreciate everyone joining us today. Another episode of Sales Pipeline Radio. We are here every Thursday at 2:30 Eastern, 11:30 Pacific. If you're joining us live, I appreciate you joining us in the middle of your workday. If you're joining us through the podcast, thanks very much for subscribing. You can catch every episode of Sales Pipeline Radio at Google Play and the iTunes Store, and you can catch all past episodes as well at salespipelineradio.com. Every week we are featuring some of the best and brightest minds, interviews, discussions, updates, new data and trends in B2B sales and marketing. We cover the entire funnel, not just the top or the bottom, but everything that's working to help companies build sustainable, repeatable pipelines. Very excited today to have with us John Hall. He's the co-founder and CEO of Influence and Company, and his business really specializes in creating content that helps fuel companies' content marketing efforts, helping their employees become influencers in the industry, a very hot topic in a lot of circles in B2B marketing. So excited to have John with us here today. John, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Can you hear me fine?
Yeah, you sound great. So I appreciate you joining us, and I know that a lot of marketers and a lot of even salespeople are thinking about the idea of influence, what influence means. Could you give us, what is your definition of influence in a B2B context, in a sales pipeline context? What does it mean, and why is it important?
Yeah, I mean, for this context, to me, it's pretty simple, is that, you know, if you can engage people in a way that results in a behavior that results in either a sale or something positive, whether it's brand advocacy, a lead, a referral, that is good. You know, that's a great way to have influence from this standpoint. And so, for the purposes of this call, and a lot of the times I'm talking to salespeople, it's about how you're engaging with different audiences to get them to change a behavior that's positive in your direction, resulting in a sale, brand advocacy, partner referral, or something also beneficial.
So how can you help us break that down a little bit? Because I think a lot of people, when they think about influence, they think about it one of two ways. Either sometimes I think about this in terms of outbound and inbound influence. In a lot of cases, you're trying to engage with people that already have influence to sort of share the message about your brand, your story. In other cases, you're trying to create influence. You're trying to become an influencer that can sort of join those ranks and gain, sort of notoriety for your organization. How do you think about that? Is that an appropriate way to think about the differences, or is there a different way you guys think about that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like for me, influence, it's actually, from a sales standpoint, it's pretty simple, is that if you can get someone to trust you, and if you can stay top of mind, so that when they're in a moment to purchase or to have one of those moments that I talked about being beneficial, then that is the purpose of building influence. And so there's a variety of ways to build trust. And I'm not saying they have to be, the person you call, or you're the person they call when they're in jail, trust. I'm saying that there's different ways to have, I call them trust touch points. So points of which you engage with them where they, for example, a lot of times in sales, it's helping them out in some way. So if you got them an article that was valuable to them that addressed a pain point, so it could be coming from you or it was something you curated, but ultimately it was something valuable to them, they go, wow, that was nice, or that was really helpful towards me, and it has a small little touch point that creates a moment of trust that over time, the more you have those, the more that you gain, their attention. And so that's kind of it's diving in deep to all the things that are those trust touch points, making sure that you're doing them, as consistently as you can. And then most of the time, those will result in some sort of a good benefit for you.
talking today to John Hall, who's the CEO and co-founder of Influence & Company. You can check them out at influenceandco.com. And I think a lot of organizations, as they warm up to the idea of influencer marketing, I mean, they're thinking about that as sort of influencer marketing and content marketing together. They're also sort of in many cases curious, like, who owns this? I think it's marketing should, in many cases, owns it. I don't see a lot of sales organizations owning it, but who in the organization should own it? It's getting assigned, in many cases, I see, to PR departments, that have had media relations and analyst relations. Can you talk a little bit about how PR and influencer marketing work together? And I think especially in your context where you guys are doing a lot of guest contributed content, you yourselves are a contributor to Inc. magazine, a columnist at Forbes. I think the lines are blurring a little bit. How should people be thinking about that, and how do they operationalize that?
Yeah, well, they've kind of all merged together, to be honest with you. I mean, before you had PR, marketing, recruiting, sales, all very separate. But what happened is that over the last 10, 15 years, sales has changed. Like, I grew up on door-to-door sales. Now it's changed to that what we're a lot of times offering is being focused on the audience or the consumer or the potential sale, and how we can help them and get them good information, help them out in a certain way. And that's what changed this kind of trend of sales is standalone, because now marketing is creating content, PR is creating content that's valuable and can be used in other parts of the business. And so that's why, PR, I think, and marketing have merged for a lot of companies. The CMO oversees both. And then there's something also that a lot of times the CMO oversees sales, or at least has a very good connection with that head of sales. And so you've got to look at it as that, okay, what are we doing from a sales side of things? What are we doing to listen to customers? And what I call content triggers or triggering is when there's a moment where a salesperson listens to a customer and realizes, wow, there's an aha moment. Something I said to them was super engaging and helped with the sale. Or there's this moment where they have a sales barrier where it's not hidden very well. And so they have to communicate that back to that central point or department that's leading that. A lot of times right now it's still marketing, but it's starting to merge into like a head of strategy will be dictating that. But it's important to have those content triggers, because then that team who let's say it's a marketing team, they can fuel your efforts by creating content based on those aha moments or content triggers that you can use directly, but then also they can feed the industry with that content so that those barriers happen less and less, and there's content to support when you're selling to people. And so the short answer to that is that, most of the time, these kind of areas of marketing and PR kind of combining in a way and merging, and, there's a central content creation or creating or team that's creating the content that both PR, marketing, they're using, and there's an overall strategy between, when we get a PR mention, this is what it's important to have in there. When we're doing byline pieces, this is what we need to get in there so that it's useful for not just brand awareness, but also our sales and marketing team.
So how do you engage existing outside influencers as part of this as well? I mean, in every industry, there's a handful of people that already have influence. I mean, I think, if we were having this conversation, 15 years ago, we'd be talking about a smaller set of more traditional publications, more traditional journalists and analysts that you really sort of had to engage. There's a long tail now of individuals that have influence, people that started a blog that became influential, people that work at a company in a function and became influential amongst their peers. What are the best practices for companies that want to leverage that new PR opportunity? Those influencers that have an audience that, in some cases, aren't held to the same sort of formal rigors of PR and media relations. What are the steps companies can take to begin to build influence among those influencers?
Gotcha. Well, the first step is to actually build your own influence. So it's one to document and actually how you're going to build internal influence. A lot of times people look at influencer marketing as only external. I don't. I look at influencer marketing as something that is internal and external, because you want to build your own influence at the same time. You want to build that, and you also want to build external influence with people that are influencers not within your organization. But it's important that you're looking initially out the gate is, how are we building up our key employees, our CEO, our VP of sales, our VP of tech, as influencers, because it will make your life so much easier to integrate or to work with other influencers in the industry, because you have something that they want. There's the one thing that influencers love more than money is more influence. So if what I've realized with our company is that once we've actually built a following that people pay attention to us and we have a certain influence, there's a lot of people that have influence that want to do stuff with us. They want to do cross-marketing. They want to do webinars with us. They want to do things that put our kind of influence together so that we can feed off each other. So that's the first part, is that you've got to be very clear is that when we're doing influencer marketing strategy, it's vital that you're building your own influence first. It makes your life a lot easier down the road. One of the examples that I give is that with speaking, there's a lot of companies that do sponsored speaking a lot, where we don't do any of it right now because a lot of times conferences are wanting us at their event. Now, that's because we've spent time building up keynotes throughout our company that we get asked to do that. But there's another company that I just talked to where they're paying for every time they're doing a keynote. And that's why it's so important to earn it first and to build it from within. Now, to do that, it's making sure that you're committed to it. You're investing in employees, not just one, but actually, several employees that you can have critical mass in case one leaves, but then also that speak to different audiences. It's a lot more powerful when you have 3 that have very specific, audiences they're going after than one that has like a general audience. And so you have to look and say, who are we investing within this organization to have influence? And then how are we, how are we investing in them? Are we doing a byline campaign with PR mentions, getting them on lists? Are we investing in their social account? What are we doing to get them speaking gigs? There's all these things that happen. It could be we're investing in this person to have a book about this topic. But what ends up happening when you do that is that there is this spread effect, because once you do some of these things, those don't go away. A book doesn't go away. When you get PR mentions, you can leverage them in sales for a year or so afterwards, even longer sometimes. So it's important that you commit to that and then look at how you're leveraging that across the company, not just in their personal brand.
Talking to John Hall today, the CEO and founder of Influencer Company. We're going to take a quick break, pay some bills. We'll be right back, talk a lot more about influencer. I like the idea we're thinking about the term inbound, outbound, internal, and external influence. Lots of opportunity for companies here. We're going to try to break it down a little further, help you understand the next steps to how to do this for your own organization. We'll be right back. Sales Pipeline Radio.
In a world where the speed of innovation and change in B2B marketing has never been greater, the only thing bigger is the need for clarity, for a blueprint, for a guide to what's really working and how to apply it specifically to increase sales pipeline growth, velocity, and conversion. That's what you'll find in the Modern Marketer's Field Guide. Download it free at HeinzMarketing.com. Marketers acknowledge that account-based marketing is important, but what does that really mean? ABM requires a deep understanding of your target accounts and the people within its internal buying committee. Are you prepared to launch and drive results from an ABM program in your organization? Get the recording for the Modern Marketers Workshop, ABM, from strategy to action and results. A fully online, on-demand workshop that includes an interactive workbook, the presentation slides, and templates, all for $195. Visit www.heinzmarketing.com/workshops. That's HEINZ marketing.com and get started now.
All right, let's get started again with that influencer himself, Matt Heinz.
Thanks very much, Paul. Excited to have John Hall with us today talking about influence, how to build influence, how to leverage influence, and how to use that to drive business and drive pipeline in your organization. Lots of great guests coming up in future episodes, in future weeks here at Sales Pipeline Radio. Next week, we are going to feature our very own Brian Hansford. He is going to join us and talk about the latest research we've seen that his team has conducted around marketing performance management. How are companies better understanding what marketing is working, which marketing they should double down on, which marketing they should start to ramp down, and how that can directly impact not only optimization of budgeting, but also pipeline results. In future weeks, we've got Nadja Gausi joining us to talk about, from Prezi, joining us to talk about conversational sales presentations and much more coming up. Make sure you don't miss an episode. Join us, salespipelineradio.com. You can join us live every week on the Sales Lead Management Radio Network. You can also join us via our podcast to make sure you never miss an episode at Google Play and the iTunes Store. We are continuing to discuss influencer marketing with John Hall, who is the founder and president and CEO of Influence & Co. You can check them out at influenceandco.com. And we were talking before the break about helping your internal employees become influencers. And my follow-up question to you, John, is how do you decide who should be one of those influencers? I assume that there is some science in terms of selecting people that are going to be most likely successful influencers. Is it based on personality? Is it based on insight? Like, what are some of the primary factors that make someone more likely to be successful as an influencer within your company and for your brand?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And there's multiple things that we look at. We look at, one, what's going to benefit the company the most from the standpoint of external people and the stakeholders. So is it going to be valuable for the CEO position, because that's a lot of times the looked at as the top leader of the company. A lot of times that is the person, and it's pretty obvious they are. However, the problem is there's other factors that prevent you from doing that, where I'll give you an example of one. There's a CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company that I know that would be terrible because it's impossible for him to get him to respond to anything. So you can't have an effective thought leadership influencer strategy from within when you have someone who's just not going to be effective to work with. And it also sets a terrible example for the other people that follow, because ultimately with most companies you want to build off, as you grow that thought leadership across the company, you want to build off of it. And if you start with two people that aren't going to contribute and have the time to, be a part of that, then they're not going to be great for it. And then that's when you look at other options. So, first, obviously, the benefit to the company externally. Two, who's going to cooperate and actually be a good, influencer and thought leader within the organization that will make, some time and also is, intelligent to differentiate the content as well. And then you look at what are important strategies for the company. So, for example, there might be, we worked with Dell for one campaign where we were focusing on their entrepreneur division, because that's what Michael's strategic focus was. And so we worked with the entrepreneurial group there because it made sense that was a strategic focus to get content from them that was influencing that industry and targeting entrepreneurs. So it made sense that it wasn't coming from somebody like a Michael or the main part of the company. It was this specific area. And so there's a variety of things that factor in there. Also, what the employee, is this person going to be staying around? Does everything point to that? Are we set up well where they will stick around and not leave after a couple months? And so there's a variety of those things that we look at. Those are probably like 4 or 5 main ones, but there's probably I would say 5 to 10 other ones that are minor. But you look at that and you say, okay, this makes sense. Or, for example, budget could also be an issue. We don't have any budget, so we have to do 1 or 2. So you look at all those factors, and then you map it out and say, okay, here's where we're starting, here's where we can grow, here's what measurements are for that, and then you scale it based on that. And some companies might start off with 1 or 2 that end up doing 7 or 8, after things get really rolling after a year or 2.
You asked, or you brought up one of the criteria of trying to identify influencers inside the organization as someone that's going to have some longevity. That's a hard thing to control, And so, how do you figure out the trade-off between having someone that is predisposed to be engaging, to become an influencer? Do you put golden handcuffs on those individuals, or do you simply say, okay, we're going to leverage them as long as they're here and benefit from that, even if they end up leaving at some point?
Yeah, I mean, you can do that. And, I'm not terribly scared of employees leaving. I think with Branson's quote that, invest in people so that they can leave and treat them well enough so they don't want to or something. I don't know. I could have butchered it, but that's how I feel about things. And we've invested in some of the VP's, brands, and we've had 1 or 2 leave. As crazy as it has been really beneficial because we've built up their influence and they go on to another company. And, obviously we have non-competes and things like that, but they've been huge advocates for us. And so it's been, as crazy as it is, it's worked out well in our case. I'm not saying that every company, somebody leaves and they have influence and it benefits them. That doesn't always happen. But I would say that there's a couple things, that you can look at. Obviously there's things you can put in, compensation that actually, motivates them to stay. It can be, how you present them with it is that, hey, we're going to invest in your brand here. So a part of that is that, you're to stick around. We have this, kind of this expectation that, we are going to make, invest in you, and this is kind of what we're agreeing to. There's different things you can do to say, like, okay, well, we're going to be, supporting you, but this also goes away if you leave, and so there's a variety of things you can do to actually, what I've found out, though, is ultimately you've got to, like, we invest in the people that there's a certain level of trust with, and we've been, lucky thus far where we haven't had a lot of turnover with those people. A lot of other companies, if you can't somewhat, trust the employees that you're going to be investing a significant amount of resources into, then it probably won't end up being worth the investment.
So how do you get started with this? What are the components if we were to give someone sort of a checklist, whether or not, they're committed to being, the long-term forever influencer, but the things you need to have, the building blocks, the foundation. Is it content? Is it creating content? Is it curating content? Is it setting up your social feeds? Is it engaging with other influencers? What are some of the building blocks? The people listening to this, they either want to be influencers or want to start to enable the potential influencers in their organization. What are the few things they should be doing to get started?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And here's some inspiration here, and is that it was like 5 or 6 years ago before we started this company. I didn't even have a LinkedIn profile, I don't think. If I did, it probably didn't have a picture, and it was crappy. Didn't have any presence. I would say, like, outside, like, my grandma and mom and family. Besides that, I was pretty much a nobody from a national standpoint, And it's like when I look at where I was to where I am today. Now, I'm not also the most well-known person in the world either, but at the same time, is that the influence that we've built in 5 years, just to me, it's pretty significant. That's resulted in opportunity for myself and the company. Now, what I did was not rocket science, and it's as simple as the first thing is documenting and saying, here is my documented strategy for thought leadership, how we're going to build influence, and it's not going to happen in 2 to 3 months. It's not going to happen just like that. But we're going to keep moving towards it. We're going to start off. The most common thing is to obviously document. Here are the things that can be beneficial to building up influence and thought leadership. There's bylines, op-ed. There's PR mentions. There's getting on lists of some sort. There's your own media. So like your blog, building up like what you're doing here with an audience that pays attention to you as a trusted source for information. There's all these things that factor in. And there's content that you can look at that I've written and different things out there that can help you kind of form what that looks like. And then it's just every month or two addressing that. Did we move towards where we were able to create some bylines here, for example? Well, bylines, like, did you get in Forbes? No, it didn't. You're not necessarily just going to all of a sudden get in like every dream publication you want or the Times. You got to look and say, okay, well, it might be this starting off with this blog or starting off with this smaller site. My first site that I got in was youngentrepreneur.com. It was ran by the Torn brothers, who are good friends of mine now. And I remember my mom actually putting that up on the refrigerator, which is hilarious that at this age I'm 33 and my mom is doing that. But it was not a Times or it's a good site, but it was very limited to young entrepreneurs at the time. And but it did great things, honestly, for me. There's people who saw it. My network started seeing me contribute, and it was a start. And I kept going and leveraging things where then we added kind of press mentions, started building social channels as a part of the map that we had created. But always the consistent content coming from me has been consistent from the start, because you want to be that trusted source of information that people go to. So no matter what, the documenting strategy has to be core at the beginning. You have to start getting content coming from you. And then a lot of these other things like social for aggregation and some original content, that makes sense. And, the PR mentions getting talked about as an expert and a leader in different spaces. Or even at this point, having a book. That's kind of this in year 4 or 5, that's what we knew that we would probably do around this time. And so that's how it all plays, into each other. And over time, as you take those steps, it all starts off with those couple things, and it grows and grows and grows. But you have to be dedicated and committed to keep moving forward and not have this expectation is overnight you're going to be, keynoting the largest events in the world.
And I think it's that commitment and that patience that sometimes separates those that are successful from those that give up on this. And this is not like a pay-per-click campaign that you can just turn on and expect to see, clicks and results immediately. This takes time. What just in the couple minutes we have left here to finish up with John Hall, who's the CEO, founder of Influencing Company. What's the recommendations you give people in terms of how long you should expect it take to start to see an ROI from influence marketing?
It just depends on your goals and which ones you're tackling. So, for example, if you're like, hey, we want a bunch of leads to happen that result in sales within, a month or two, that's harder. If you want, right now our inbound is a huge part of our business, but it took it probably took a year or two to actually be a major part. Did we see some success, early on, the first 6 months to a year? Yes, but it wasn't anything that was going to dramatically change our business. Now it does with the inbound leads that we get. So like on sales and inbound, you've got to be committed to it. Trust me, there's other ways of sales that you can do to get more sales in short term than what I'm talking about here. In the long term, it's by far one of the best and most scalable, so that's why it's important to do a commitment. In the first 6 months to a year, you're not going to see anything that's going to change your life, in my opinion. Yes, sometimes there are some people that have early success, but I just want to set expectations. But then also, it's how you leverage it. So, for example, if we have a client that is like, yes, that is our goal, but we also, one of the clients that I love is Hawk Media, is that they, Eric, their CEO, and Tony, their president, they leverage the content in so many different ways. They use it in their sales process. They use it for recruiting. They add it to their newsletter. They share it on social. They actually really, really embrace when they just, started initially out the gate creating content, getting the PR mentions and these things. And that's why they've had a lot of success earlier. So that's an example of one where it's like, okay, well, that happened sooner. But then there's other goals that, we had one client say, hey, this is, we're specifically only using this. We already know our 200 clients, and we don't even have more than 200 clients, but we need to nurture them, and we're going to use this in the sales pipeline. Well, they immediately out the gate started using that content in their sales pipeline, as a part of the process, and their conversions went up. I think it was in that 6 month span, they went up 50%, which is pretty high. That's a very high number, so that's bad expectations, but 50% of conversion increase from adding this thought leadership content to the sales pipeline. So that was a little different where it's like, hey, that's not lead generation, that's helping convert with sales. So it depends on kind of what your goals are, but those are some examples of kind of expectations to have.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, I want to thank our guest, John Hall from Influencing Company. You can learn more about them at influenceandco.com. We're going to have to jump and let some other companies and other hosts have their show here, Paul. But thanks very much for joining us on Sales Pipeline Radio. If you want to hear more and share this conversation about influence marketing with others on your team, you definitely go to salespipelineradiо.com, find that replay, and also obviously join us on the podcast at the Google Play and iTunes Store. Thanks again for joining us today. We'll see you next week. For my producer, Paul, this is Matt Hines. We'll see you next week. Sales Pipeline Radio.
You've been listening to Sales Pipeline Radio, all things sales pipeline, with your host, Matt Hines, right here in the Funnel Radio channel for at-work listeners like you.